This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, world stocks edged up today as investors wait for the outcome of the U.S. Fed's policy meeting. Emerging market stocks firmed up with all eyes on the U.S. Fed's policy statement expected to come out this week. MSCI's index of emerging shares was up 0.1% on the day. That's after a three-day rout over which it lost about 3.6%. Now, also coming up on today's show. Sudan seeks to more than double tax revenues to finance its budget. Uganda to curb borrowing and lift exports post-pandemic economic recovery. And Kenya joins the global push to promote the use of electric vehicles. Well, we start off today's show in Southern Africa, where Madagascar, Mozambique and Malawi are now counting losses after a tropical storm ripped through the three nations. The storm, known as Anna, made a landfall across the countries over the weekend. Now, authorities in Madagascar say at least 34 people have been killed, while Mozambique puts the death toll from the storm at around 3. Malawi has not reported any fatalities as yet, but the storm triggered major power cuts across the nation. Here's Chao Mgono with more.
Storm Anna, formed over the east coast of Africa's largest island, Madagascar, has brought heavy rains, causing flooding and mudslides in the capital and Tananarivo. Emergency evacuations have been launched as several low-lying districts of Madagascar's capital remain under high alert.
Our house is flooded with water. We have nowhere to go. We had to come here. Our children have fallen sick. We have no money at all. We don't earn anything. We can't go out to sell anything because there's a lot of water.
The reason we are staying here is because part of our house has collapsed. We are appealing for help. If we live here, we have nowhere else to go.
Across the Indian Ocean, heavy rains and strong winds were experienced in Mozambique's central and northern districts. Government and UN agencies estimate that 500,000 people may be impacted in the provinces of Nampula, Zambezia and Sofala. A clinic and 16 classrooms have been destroyed. In neighboring Malawi, the storm plunged most parts of the country into darkness. This is after flash floods raised the water levels, forcing the electric company to shut down its generators. Power is slowly being restored to residents across the country. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, let's head to Uganda now. The country's government plans to focus economic efforts towards aiding the pandemic recovery. This is as it begins the process of formulating the 2022-2023 national budget. Now, the Ministry of Finance says that the priority of the new $12.2 billion budget will be health, social protections, security and infrastructural development. Here's CGTN's Michael Baleke with the details.
The government wants a budget to cater for those sectors that can quickly salvage the economy from the COVID-19 crisis. The Ministry of Finance says priority will be to bring people into a formal economy so that more Ugandans can get money into their pockets.
We would want to see every Ugandan in the monetized economy. And this we are going to do through scaling up commercial agriculture, industrialization based on our comparative advantage in agriculture, in minerals, in oil and gas, market access, and digital transformation.
In Uganda, the COVID-19 pandemic reduced demand due to a decline in domestic consumption, slowed down private and public investment, lowered the country's exports in regional and international markets, and reduced foreign direct investment flows. The ensuing lockdown to mitigate the pandemic also caused the reduction in trade and constrain the movement of people, further dampening businesses' economic prospects. And the government believes the repurposing of the budget will help Uganda avoid more borrowing to handle priority expenditure.
We shall only borrow for those activities which we feel we cannot do within our means. I told the country one time that this is a time for tightening our belts, of getting back a fiscal discipline, of ensuring that whatever shilling we spend is going to those very areas that we need.
Uganda's total public debt jumped 27.4% to $19.5 billion by June 2021 from $15.3 billion a year before, most of it to build big infrastructure projects. This week, Uganda announced the full reopening of its economy following 2 years of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. The government is optimistic that the reopening of the economy will improve the country's revenue collections to fund critical areas. However, the civil society organizations say the government needs to fix certain areas where it is losing a lot of money, like in poor project selection, delayed execution of projects, inefficient planning, and outright fraud.
We need the projects to work and function because a number of projects are not performing well. They are far below, and yet we are paying commitment fees. We need to work on that, improving their performance. Number two, we need a price list in this country because without a price list of government, people continue to cheat us in the procurement process.
The government believes economic growth is expected to rebound from 4.2% this financial year to 6% in the financial year 2022-2023. But this would be at risk if new COVID waves arrived, which could see the government collecting lower domestic revenues than planned. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Meanwhile, Uganda's government wants to curb its borrowing and boost exports in the meat and dairy sectors as the country finds its way out of the pandemic. Now, President Yoweri Museveni says he wants to expand the country's trade. Uganda used to sell milk to Kenya, but Kenya restricted sales in 2019. Now, Uganda's milk exports are now about 50% of what they used to be before the coronavirus curbs. Museveni says he also plans to add value to other agricultural exports, such as coffee, which has long been one of Uganda's main foreign exchange earners. Uganda's trade push follows several years of reduced lending and as programs designed to offer relief from COVID-19 induced slumps start to expire.
Uganda can do much better without borrowing, in my opinion, especially borrowing for what they call budget support, balance of payment support. We don't think that is good borrowing. But we shall manage because now the economy has been growing at like roughly 4% without tourism, without transport fully, without the hotels. Now they are opening up, so the economy will resume fast growth.
Well, let's head to Sudan now. Economic experts are slamming the country's 2022 budget. The budget seeks to more than double tax revenues to replace foreign aid, which was suspended after October's coup. Now, the government's plans include a 145% rise in tax revenues and an increase in gold exports to cover key commodities such as wheat and fuel, which could face difficulties. Now, critics say the plan will likely fuel more turmoil and anger against the ruling military government. The country has already revised down its growth target to 1.4% and is now racing to find the means to fund this year's $8.3 billion spending plan. Well, let's get the latest from the ground. We're joined by Naba Mohideen. She is in Khartoum. Great to have you with us on the show, Naba. Now, of course, as we mentioned, analysts are ringing the alarm on this government's spending plan, of course, raising taxes in order to fund this year's budget. Now, they say it is guaranteed to push Sudan further into political turmoil. Give us a sense of how Sudanese on the ground are reacting to these tax hikes.
Thank you. And yes, of course, economy is very big and very important, and it has a very big effect on the political situation. People right now are not rallying only for the political change, also for economic reasons, especially after the progress Sudan made and achieved due to the achievements and to the engage in the financial international institutions. So people right now are rallying for economic reasons also because the economy is paralyzed and most of the businesses are affected, and the prices of commodities and goods and services is rapidly rising without defined figures, and the market is undisciplined. Also, there is escalation in northern of Sudan, where protesters and protest organizers have blocked the roads linking Khartoum to north of Sudan, which is very important for the trade, especially to Egypt. Now the escalation right now, it's more than 1 week. It's a political demand, but also for economic reasons. So economy is casting big shadow on the political situation, and people already are rallying against the latest decision by the government.
And of course, as we look at the statistics, as you mentioned, prices are rising. Inflation is in excess of 300% right now. So can you paint us a picture as to how Sudanese citizens are faring right now, and give us a clearer look at how hiking those taxes will impact them going forward?
Yes, actually, the impact immediately happened because, as I said, like the goods and services are increasing every few hours, and the main factor is the exchange rate of foreign currency. Now, the only growing thing in the country is the black market. The black market is growing in the exchange rate of foreign currency and the black market for medicine. So people right now cannot afford high living expenses, including household expenses, medication, education, and even transportation to go to their businesses. So, and at the same time, the wages are so low, and it's not compatible with the increasing prices and the increasing taxes. So I think, as the analyst said, it will fuel the turmoil, and it will fuel anger against the now ruling government. And it's all need economic solution, not political solution, in order to resolve the situation.
Now, given what you just said, it is hard to see how citizens can support the military government. So give us an update on the political situation in the country right now.
The political situation right now is frozen. There is some endeavors by the United Nations to end this political crisis by holding and sponsoring talks between the civilians and military generals. The talks was launched 1 week ago. It was separated talks with the civilians, and it's supposed to be with the military during this week, and then an immediate talks between the civilian and military in one table may take place in 1 week, after 1 week. So the political situation right now is not moving forward. Yes, there is endeavors by UN, and there is some initiative, internal initiatives to solve this political crisis, because it's casting shadow on the security situation and economic situation, but it's not going very well till now, because escalation is controlling the scene. Escalation by the military generals, escalation by protest groups, and by political parties. And there is alarm of more chaos and more turmoil if if the political situation continues like this in the few coming weeks.
Right. Well, many thanks, Naba, for that great update. That, of course, is Naba Mohidin joining us there in Khartoum. Well, now let's take a look at some corporate headlines today. Tanzania has selected a company called Baker Bots as an advisor to aid in concluding those talks with international firms over a long-delayed $30 billion liquefied natural gas terminal. Now, the nation wants to sign a host government agreement with oil majors, including Equinor, ASA, and Shell by April. And South Africa's Telkom has responded to an investigation into allegations of corruption and malfeasance stretching back to 2006. The company says it will deal with the investigation on its merits in the appropriate forum. Now, this comes after President Cyril Ramaphosa authorized the Special Investigating Unit to probe Telkom's ill-fated forays in Nigeria and Mauritius. And General Motors is set to invest $7 billion in Michigan, USA to boost production of full-size electric pickups. The company adds that its plants will be able to build more than 600,000 electric trucks a year by late 2024. Now, this will boost the company's total North America electric vehicle production capacity to more than 1 million units by late 2025. And budget airline Wizz Air has warned that its fourth quarter loss will likely top the $241.2 million mark, which it reported in the third quarter. Now, this comes before an expected recovery takes off, fueled by demand from Britain. The Hungary-based carrier said the emergence of the Omicron coronavirus variant had hit sales in the latter part of its fiscal third quarter. It also expects to be impacted by ongoing travel uncertainty in January, February, and part of March. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, but still to come on the show. We take a look at the top priorities for the continent this year according to the Foresight Africa report, and a public outcry in South Africa over a hefty price increase proposed by power utility Eskom.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back. Now, as Africa gears up for recovery amid the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, the continent continues to face quite a number of challenges that are forecast to cripple economic growth going forward. Now, the Foresight Africa 2022 report points out poor infrastructure, high youth unemployment, as well as rapidly increasing debt, and of course, a climate change amongst those challenges to be overcome in 2022. Now, this means that the region's potential recovery is likely to be uneven and far behind much of the rest of the world. Well, let's delve further into that Africa Foresight report with Aloysius Uche Okoronkwo. He is, of course, a senior fellow and director of the Africa Growth Initiative in the Global Economy and Development Program at the Brookings Institute. Great to have you with us on the show, sir. Now, of course, we have to agree the pandemic has dominated the narrative for the last 2 years. When we think about the future of economic growth, as well as trade, supply chains, innovation, technology, How does this report approach Africa's priorities this year? And certainly, does the pandemic once again dictate that narrative?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. The timing of this is propitious because we just launched our report today. Absolutely. You said it all. The biggest elephant in the room in the global economy and in Africa is, of course, the pandemic. And that will determine, to a considerable extent, influence the outcome in terms of growth and development on the continent as well. We've learned a lot of things from the pandemic, as you know. We now know that Africa needs to count on its own because the global solidarity didn't come through, when needed vaccines and all that. And Africans did indeed pull together the AU's partnership for access on COVID shots, the African Medicines Supply Platform, the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Force, and of course, all the effort led by the African Special Envoys, private sector individuals, AU and the Africa CDC, UNECA, and the African Exim Bank. Going forward, we now know that this sort of continental solidarity is critical as we go forward for Africa.
Well, a lot of experts are skeptical about this. And of course, we pointed to some of the challenges that we're currently facing, such as rapidly increasing debt, high youth unemployment, and of course, the major issue of climate change and how it's impacting our economies. But one thing you say in the report is there are reasons to be cautiously optimistic. You mentioned a few. In conclusion, what are some of the greatest reasons to be optimistic?
Thank you very much. Before this job, I was actually vice president at the African Development Bank, Africa's premier institution. And that gave me the opportunity to travel from east, west, north, and south, and center on the continent. And one thing is very clear, and I'm sure you know, we are a very optimistic people, right? And so the fact that continentally now, the continent is acting in solidarity after the lessons from Ebola, and which were now applied to the pandemics, that's a reason to be optimistic. Second, we have a country like Zambia at a time when coups are happening in Mali, in Guinea, of course, recently this week in Burkina Faso, Ethiopia at war, and Sudan challenges. We have a country like Zambia where people have rallied and supported a competent and credible candidate. That all goes well for governance on the continent. Thirdly, before Zambia, remember the year before, Malawi also showed that good governance is alive and well on our continent. So basically, some of these are all reasons to be hopeful. And of course, the continent has a lot of latent assets. You mentioned the issue of the youths. How we use and make sure that our youths are gainfully employed will be important in the journey ahead. Technology, if there's anything COVID revealed, it is that the march towards a technologically driven future for Africa is alive and well. So these are all reasons to be very, very hopeful, in spite of all the naysayers about what's going on in the world and indeed what's happening in Africa.
Well, I will say it is refreshing to hear your optimism. But looking at the global picture, we have to point out the fact, as your report says, that we've witnessed the emergence of a parallel but diverging world. So how does this report assess how we're going to see this resetting traditional relations between nations going forward, and certainly the trends that will dominate sectors such as trade?
Yeah, thank you very much for asking. I mean, this is, when you think about it in terms of the dominance on trade, commercial relations, and all that, just a couple of things. If you think of the Africa of old, right, it's Britain, United States, and, France and the rest of Europe, who were, the presence were really dominant. When you look at what is happening now, if you take something like embassies, in Africa, where is the growth coming? It's the number of embassies opening, which will tell you the nature of the commercial relations. It's more from Brazil, it's from China, it's from Turkey, it's from India, Qatar, all these countries, Russia, right? So these countries have become important players on the African continent. Second, China itself, as you know, in 2000, China was principal trading partner to only two countries on the African continent. Two countries, Benin and the Gambia, two very small countries. Today, China is the #1 trading partner of 29 African countries. So already you begin to see that the traditional partners, Africa is ready for business, and therefore those who do a lot of the talking and no action, that's not the way of the future. The future lies with those who are actively engaged and really in commercial and trade relations with Africa, of which some of the countries I mentioned examples of that going forward.
Right. Well, we have run out of time, but many thanks, sir, for joining us on the show today. And thank you for those great insights as well. That, of course, was Mr. Aloysius Uche Okoronkwo. He's a senior fellow and director of the Africa Growth Initiative at the Brookings Institute. Well, let's move on now. There's been a public outcry in South Africa over a hefty price increase proposed by the power utility Eskom. The state-owned enterprise has failed to provide a reliable power supply since 2008, but has consistently increased prices. It's once again asking consumers to pay more despite years of corruption, as well as mismanagement and poor maintenance. Now, South Africa's economy was on the mend, but a stiff electricity hike may set that recovery back for consumers and businesses. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire reporting.
It's lunchtime in Johannesburg. Business is slowly picking up at Nazir Farakia's Wimpy restaurant, but it's still a far cry from pre-pandemic levels.
We've been through the mill, Every time a new COVID wave came out, our business was like a yo-yo, just up and down. We relied heavily on takeaway business. Our sit-down obviously was badly affected over the last 2 years. And in the takeaway situation, your turnovers tend to drop a bit, because people are not spending the kind of money that they would spend if they were sitting down.
Farakia's business now faces another blow. Power utility Eskom is asking for a hefty price increase of 20.5%.
Electricity now is almost the same amount as the rental that you're paying every month. Just to stay in business, we need to do whatever we can. So unfortunately, we don't have much of a choice here. We've got the generators to back us up. And if it comes to a point where it's cheaper to run the generator as opposed to the local electricity supply, that could be an option.
Electricity prices here have ballooned over 750% in the last 15 years. Another increase is far too much for consumers already dealing with sharply rising inflation, food and petrol prices. Municipalities including Tshwane and Cape Town have rejected the proposal.
We have a declining economic environment within South Africa. It's both unfair, we feel, as a city, and it is just completely unaffordable. Whilst over the last 2 years, we've had rolling blackouts, the worst ever. What are our residents paying for? For absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so it really is very concerning. And as a city of Cape Town, we reject the request for a 20.5%. We reject it.
Years of corruption, mismanagement and maintenance backlogs have depleted Eskom's balance sheet. High costs of independently produced power, carbon taxes and a $30 billion debt bill are adding to those woes.
And the easiest port of call is obviously through the consumers, through increased tariffs. Government has already bailed Eskom out several times with a couple of tens of billions. And no doubt we'll see that again, a couple of bailouts coming out again, because Eskom's facing another problem where a lot of consumers aren't actually paying their monthly tariffs. So there's a lot of money owed to Eskom, as well as Eskom is in debt. It's a really dire situation.
A decision on the power price hike lies in the hands of the country's energy regulator. South Africans are hoping for an inflation-linked increase of around 6%, but NERSA will have to carefully weigh Eskom's needs with a fragile economy and hard-pressed consumers. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. U.S. President Joe Biden to consider imposing sanctions on President Putin of Russia if it invades Ukraine. And we take you to the 68th edition of the UK Toy Fair as it gets underway in London. Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now let's take a look at other headlines this hour. Two groups have come out to demand a return to constitutional order in Burkina Faso, and this follows a military coup on Monday. Now, the days following the coup have been characterized by massive celebrations by citizens who support the military. But the Convention of Non-Governmental Organizations for the Observation of Domestic Elections and the Coalition of Democratic Patriots came out on Wednesday to demand the safety of the ousted President Roch Kabore, among other demands. And fresh fighting has reportedly resumed in northern Ethiopia, threatening the distribution of humanitarian aid. Fighters from the rebel TPLF based in the Tigray region have confirmed fighting, claiming they were responding to attacks on their positions by pro-government forces in the neighboring region of Afar. Now, Afar authorities have accused the TPLF of attacking towns located on the border with Tigray. And South Sudan's government says intercommunal violence in the eastern part of the country has left 32 people dead. The attack occurred early this week by yet to be identified armed men who also raided cattle from South Sudan's Jonglei state. And China's assistance to Zimbabwe in the medical sphere has seen the construction of hospitals, donation of essential drugs and equipment, as well as a training of health professionals. Now, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, China has stepped up the support to include vaccine donations and a $500,000 upgrade of Wilkins Hospital, which is Zimbabwe's national COVID-19 treatment facility. And that is a recap of other headlines this hour. And let's now turn our attention to international news. U.S. President Joe Biden says that he will consider imposing sanctions on President Vladimir Putin, and that's if Russia invades Ukraine. Now, he also adds that he may move in some of the 8,500 U.S. troops who are on standby. He made these comments during a press briefing in Washington. Let's listen.
May I ask you about when you'll make a decision about deploying those troops? What will lead to that?
What would lead to that is what's going to happen, what Putin does or doesn't do. And I may be moving some of those troops in the nearer term, just because it takes time. And again, it's not provocative. It's just exactly what I said. Is that as long as we have to reassure. If you notice, you don't see a lot of concern in terms of their security and of our our NATO allies in Western Europe, but in Eastern Europe there's reason for concern.
Can you tell me whether you think, sir, that the risk of an invasion is increasing or decreasing or steady just as it has been these recent days?
There will be enormous consequences if he were to go in and invade, as he could, the entire country, or a lot less than that as well, for Russia, not only in terms of economic consequences and political consequences, but it will be enormous consequences worldwide. This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Meanwhile, in Italy, Rome is asking local companies not to participate in a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the video conference is aimed at boosting bilateral business ties and features top managers from leading energy and financial companies. Amid worsening tensions between Moscow and, of course, the West, summit organizers now say it will go ahead even as some companies have withdrawn. Meanwhile, representatives from Russia, Ukraine, Germany and France are holding talks in Paris over the issue. And EU ministers have recommended that member states ease travel within the European Union for those who are vaccinated against COVID-19. This will scrap restrictions based on the country or region of origin. Now, the recommendations, which are not binding, will mean that an EU digital COVID certificate will be sufficient to travel round the bloc. However, the recommendations allow countries to impose additional measures in exceptional circumstances. They come into force on February 1st.
Nous avons aussi adapté notre arsenal juridique.
We have also adapted our legal arsenal, and I am pleased to say we adopted today our revised recommendations for travel within the European Union so that the reasoning changes, and as many member states have already started doing, we focus much more on the personal situation of the people, vaccinated or not, than the epidemiological situation in this or that country or region of the European Union, with restrictions which should obviously be stricter for people who are not vaccinated.
And let's head to China now, where the state has announced a number of tax reductions to help businesses recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, to boost economic growth. Here's CGTN's Yang Shanshan with more.
China cut taxes and fees of nearly 1.1 trillion yuan in 2021. That's about $170 billion. China says it will extend this policy to support business and stabilize economic growth in 2022. Tax authorities say enterprises will enjoy deductions in research and development expenses, and firms in energy and heating will get deferral benefits.
We will cut fees and taxes for small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly in the manufacturing industry. We hope this policy will help them overcome the difficult times. The tax and fee cuts will also help stabilize China's economic growth.
This year, China also aims to optimize the tax system by expanding contactless payment services and moving most tax returns process online.
We will implement preferential measures like tax refunds and deductions for foreign trade companies. We will optimize our tax service support for cross-border e-commerce firms and continue to open up China's economy.
The government says it will also continue its crackdown on tax evaders to improve regulations. The International Monetary Fund has slashed the global economic growth this week as pandemic continues to cast uncertainties to the recovery. China will roll out a flexible monetary policy and a proactive fiscal policy to stabilize economic growth. Yang Shanshan, CGTN, Beijing.
And still in China, the country has issued guidelines for implementing the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, which of course is the world's largest free trade deal. Now, China was also the first country to ratify the RCEP last year. Here's Dai Ki with more details.
After years of talks, over a dozen countries signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership in November 2020. It took effect on January 1st this year. and China has rolled out guidelines as a member of what is now the world's largest trading bloc.
The guidelines aim to encourage local governments and industries to seize the development opportunities of the agreement and fulfill its commitments, coordinate domestic enterprises and have them adapt to a more open environment and better competition, develop regional and global markets, and witness high-quality implementation.
With a total of 30 measures, the guidelines span a range of areas. This includes facilitating commodity trade, bolstering investment, and better protecting intellectual property rights. Officials say more than 90% of commodity trading products will eventually be tax-free under the RCEP framework, and that relevant enterprises should make use of the benefits.
The deal will help Chinese companies explore new markets and boost trade between RCEP members. At the same time, it will also help them make full use of China's mega market to expand economic and trade scale, increase exchanges, and jointly expand and strengthen the RCEP market.
The free trade deal covers a market of 2.2 billion people. That's nearly a third of the world's population. It's valued at more than $26 trillion, covering about 30% of global gross domestic product. Daikai, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's head to Britain now, where the 68th edition of the UK Toy Fair is currently underway in London. That's after last year's event was cancelled owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, according to the British Toy and Hobby Association, UK toy sales in 2021 dropped about 3%. Toys based on popular movies and TV shows accounted for around 28% of those sales. Now, analysts are now predicting that toy prices will surge this year amid supply chain disruptions and a rise in manufacturing costs. But this year, new installments in franchises such as Batman, Spider-Man and Jurassic Park are set to be released, so it's expected to be a bumper year for related licensed toys.
As you hear in the media, everything's going up, whether it's food or energy. Unfortunately, the price of toys will also go up. And that's, as I say, through the raw materials, through the cost of the shipping. And yes, it will translate to consumer pricing. The reality is the products that we're buying or the cost of manufacturing is higher than it was. So we need to pass that cost on, otherwise we're not in business.
Trade fairs are absolutely vital to the toy industry. What we have heard again and again in the past 2 years is that people really wanted trade fairs to come back. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be back here, to be seeing people in person, and deals really take place. You speak to the exhibitors here, you speak to the visitors here, people are opening new accounts, they're meeting new retailers, they're forming business partnerships. It's not just for show, this is an essential networking event.
Now, the Chinese Spring Festival is normally a boom time for countries like Ethiopia due to the higher demand from China. The African country, which is a major coffee bean exporter to China, has in recent years also been increasing processed coffee exports. Now, these products are not only gaining acceptance with Chinese customers, but also seeing higher sales. Here's CGTN's Gerum Chala with more.
This is Cafe Tomoka, one of the most famous coffee brands in Ethiopia and operating in neighboring Nairobi, Kenya too. Tomoka is known for its finest Ethiopian coffee and its cafes across the nation, which provide you with the best flavor and service. This is a roasted and packed coffee and is ready for the Chinese market.
Our brand was founded around 1953. We already export our coffee to several African nations, to Europe and China.
So in different cafes across the country, especially here in the capital, Addis Ababa, Tomoka coffee brands are loved by customers, and we have one of them here with me.
I always drink coffee at this place, and it has amazing taste.
Considering the taste and quality as well as in terms of finding the real Ethiopian-born coffee, this is where you should come. I think Ethiopia is the best coffee nation in the world.
Coffee exporters from here to China now say they need a partnership with Chinese companies to succeed in the business.
We badly need strong global partners to grow our business in the world. We would like to be a corporation, but the most important destination for us now is China. They love our coffee and its quality is excellent. So if we can get partners from China, I think the sky is the limit after that.
Ethiopia is where coffee Arabica has originated from, and the country is already high on the world's coffee map, and it makes one of its biggest foreign currency earnings from the export of green beans. But still, the best quality Ethiopian coffee needs more global market, and many say the Chinese market is one future promising destination where many other Ethiopian coffee growers and exporters are already laying their eyes on. Grumtara, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, tropical fruits are a must-have during the Lunar New Year celebrations. Many of these fruits, such as pineapples and bananas, come from the Philippines. While Gretchen Malaled reports from Manila on how these foods are grown, harvested, and end up on Chinese tables.
One of the top exports of the Philippines to China are fruits. For the past years, tropical fruits such as bananas, pineapples, mangoes, and avocados are being served on the dining tables of more and more Chinese families. And that becomes more evident on Chinese New Year, where the demand for fruits become higher. I'm now here at the oldest Chinatown in the world, Binondo. The country is still under tight quarantine restrictions because of the surge in coronavirus cases, but the streets are bustling with people buying fruits for the Chinese New Year meal. The top two fruits exported to China are bananas and pineapples. They are grown and harvested from the southern Philippines, where the land is fertile and the crops are abundant.
This is one of the biggest pineapple plantations in the world. 26,000 hectares of sweet native Philippine pineapples that can be found in the province of Bukidnon. With almost a century of history growing pineapples, Del Monte Philippines Inc. has perfected the whole year-round harvest of high-quality pineapples.
With its fertile and volcanic soil, allow us to grow sweet, flavorful pineapples year-round. Our strategic location, availability of land and planting materials, plus the experienced farmers and growing technology are our advantage.
The company is the largest pineapple exporter to China, with a market share of more than 50%. Hundreds of thousands of pineapples are exported weekly to China and sold under the S&W Sweet 16 brand. The demand for pineapples has grown for the Chinese New Year, as they are often offered as gifts. It is said that the round-shaped eyes around pineapples represent money, coins, or wealth.
Every week, we ship like 100 containers pineapple to China. But before the Chinese New Year, we see the number increase to 130 to 140.
Aside from pineapples, bananas are also a must-have at dining tables every Chinese New Year. Bananas grow as a bunch, which symbolizes family unity, and the color yellow also represents happiness. China has been the top export market for the Philippine Cavendish banana since 2011, with a market share of more than 90%.
The Philippine banana industry is already more than 50 years old. Okay, so over time, I would say that we were able to perfect not only the art, but the science of growing bananas.
But throughout the years, the industry has faced several challenges such as high tariffs, plant infestations, and rising competition from neighboring countries. The pandemic also affected production and logistics. The Philippine banana market share shrunk to 46% in 2020. The Agriculture Department has set its eye on helping the banana industry by providing production support and containing the Panama disease, which affected harvest yields. Gretchen Malalad, CGTN, Manila.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices rising towards $89 a barrel within sight of a 7-year high. They were supported by tight supply and geopolitical tensions in Europe and the Middle East. Now, this, of course, has raised concerns about further disruptions going forward. Meanwhile, gold prices steady today as investors refrained from making big bets in the market ahead of a U.S. central bank decision on the pace of policy tightening. But anxiety over Ukraine kept gold prices supported near the previous session's 10-week high. Well, let's now take a short break, still to come on the show. Electric car charging stations come to Kenya as it joins the global push.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
And let's go to South Africa now, where a company is considering trialing electric minibus taxis. But the SA Taxi CEO, Terry Keir, says that any shift away from taxis that use fossil fuels will be a medium to long-term project. And if the program does move ahead, a study by Stellenbosch University suggests that a standalone solar power is the only option to power those taxis. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on that.
The challenge is that the country's grid is already under huge strain, with load shedding still the order of the day.
If we were to electrify all 240,000 taxis that we have in South Africa, it will consume probably about 10% of our national electricity demand.
A study by Stellenbosch University sees potential for the program, but not using the current fleet of coal-fired power stations.
One of the big challenges we have in South Africa is that our electricity is actually generated by burning coal. So by switching from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle engine, you may actually increase the emissions.
The question on everybody's minds is who will carry the cost of switching from fossil fuel to electricity for those minibus taxis.
Consumers, which is the poor of our country, will have to pay for that if government doesn't come up with the capitalization cost for that. And it's highly unlikely that our government will be able to afford 240,000 taxis to be replaced.
We need government's buy-in and somebody like an investment agency to help people transform their vehicles to electric vehicles, because the owners are very often, they own 1 to 5 to maybe 10 vehicles. These guys can't afford to just change their capital investment from diesel to electric.
The taxi associations are adamant that they must be part of the planning process.
We are going to scrutinize this product very, very closely. One would be that issue of its impact on the environment. Secondly, is the cost aspect. Will it be, cost effective? Are we going to be able to utilize? Will it stand, the pressure of the taxi industry?
The minibus taxi sector in South Africa is a major public transporter. The question now remains whether they'll get convinced to go towards electric taxis or not, and who's going to fund them. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Kenya is joining the global push to promote the use of electric vehicles and reduce reliance on petrol and diesel. International EV startups have been entering the country in troops. Well, Nopia Ride is one of them, and it is now playing a key role in reducing emissions from Nairobi's notorious traffic. Here's CGTN's Najma Abdirazak with a story.
Driving around Nairobi and squeezing through its famous traffic gives an indication of just why the Kenyan capital ranks among the most polluted cities in the world. Idle engines belching clouds of black smoke, a common sight hard to ignore. But not far from these congested roads, a new partnership between EcoRent, Africa's fast all-electric ride-hailing taxi firm, and one of Kenya's leading universities is looking to reduce and improve Nairobi's air quality.
One of the research centers we have in the university deals on renewable energy, particularly solar energy. And so this project actually is aligned to that, in that we'll be using this project not only to harness, but also to use that energy in these electrical cars. So very much in line with what the world is thinking about.
EcoRent, under its parent company Nopia Ride, currently runs an electric taxi fleet service in Kenya. Its latest solar hub adds to the growing network of charging stations the Finnish company has introduced across Nairobi since entering the Kenyan market back in 2018. And according to its founder and CEO, the next step for Nopia Ride is to now go 100% green as it bets on solar energy.
Today this agreement is signed and we start the work, and this is the way it should go. So I think that the world needs to understand that combining clean mobility, electric vehicles and solar energy or renewable energy is something that has to happen in order if we want to fight this climate combat.
The current electric vehicle push in Kenya comes as the country looks to cut emissions by 32% by 2030. Electric vehicles currently make up a small percentage of all vehicles sold here in Kenya. But things are fast changing, and as more and more Kenyans become carbon cautious, they're expected to abandon these fossil fuel burners to get behind the wheel of an electric car. When it comes to accelerating electric mobility, the Kenyan government, for its part, has taken steps that include a lower import duty of 20% for EVs compared with 30% for petrol and diesel vehicles. It's also currently working on a policy that's set to guide tariffs for recharging and licensing of electric vehicles, a move championed by climate activists.
We're already producing more energy than we use in Kenya, and that energy could actually be utilized in electrical cars instead of petroleum, which we are importing. So just lowering the taxes in Kenya for electric cars would have the benefits of not only creating more jobs, which will happen, but additionally reducing the amount of, let's say, foreign currency we need to import oil to this country, and not to mention the impact it has on the environment.
In the meantime, as Kenya now moves towards meeting its climate goals, more and more international EV startups like EcoRent are expected to set base in the country and together build a clean mobility future. Najma Abdirazak, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand strengthened today with market attention firmly pinned on the US Fed policy plan. Now, supporting the rand, the South African Reserve Bank is expected to raise rates tomorrow in its first policy meeting of the year. Other domestic drivers of the currency this week include December producer inflation data, which is also due on Thursday, and of course, December budget numbers. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.